All right, guys. So in this lesson, we're going to be going over the hook, story, offer framework. So whenever you're crafting creatives, or you're trying to write compelling copy, or you're trying to test a new creative, you want to have this framework in the back of your head. So that way you can start diagnosing what's actually going on. And I'll show you how you can diagnose the hook, story, offer framework to see what hook is working good for your product, what story is working good for your product, and ultimately what offer is working good for your product. And at different stages, whether it's targeting cold traffic, that's people that's not aware of your brand, or whether that's retargeting, targeting people that are already aware of your brand, what offer works for them. All right, so let me select the highlighter. All right, so the hook is the creative. It's the video. It's what they see. All right. So I have some examples over here. So I'm going to click on one of them to kind of hit the point home. Let's click this one. So this is the hook right here. This is what stops them in the feed. It's the largest part of the ad. And when they're flying through the feed, you have maybe a 0.5 of a second before you can hook them. 0.5 of a second. So you have to hook them in a half a second. That's the first step. Is they're flying through the feed. They're trying to consume something that is important to them. And if your creative does not stand out and it doesn't hook them, no matter what you do right after, it doesn't matter. We'll talk about story and offer. So this is your hook. So whenever you think hook, it's your creative. It's your video. This is also a hook. And by the way, 82% of your traffic comes from a good hook. 82%. So if you just focus on the creative part, getting the best creatives that work for that platform. For this example, we're using Facebook. So whatever creatives work best for that platform, and they kind of interrupt that pattern and they get people to stop, so that way they can start reading your story, just right here. That's when you have a good hook. So this is your hook, your creative, your video. All right, let's go up a little bit. So now we know that over 80% of your traffic is going to come from a great hook. And this is what we're ultimately testing is creatives, whether it's video, whether it's static images, whether it's different concepts of static images. We're ultimately trying to find a good hook that's going to get people to stop. Because remember, you have 0.5 of a second, half a second. Even if you have a good story and you had a good offer, it doesn't matter because ultimately, let's go back to that previous one. They scrolled past through this ad. So if the story was good and the offer was good, it doesn't matter because they scrolled through it. They didn't even consume it. They didn't even stop to consume it. So that's ultimately what we're doing is we're trying to find the best hook. So now that we got the hook point, basically we kind of hit it home. Now we move on to the story. All right, so the story. So the story, let's go back to the other one. This is basically your copy. So this is your story right here. Take 20% off your first order and revamp your wardrobe with our best-selling Luxe collection. They're promoting their Luxe collection. They're displaying their pants, shoes, t-shirts, and all the other stuff that's in the creative. So that's the story. All right, I've now stopped at the feed. Okay, what's this all about? And then what ends up happening is once they stop, they start reading the story, which is right here. That's it. And then they get to the offer, just right here. This is your offer. Just 20% off your first order. Let's go up a little bit. So now that we understand what story is, that's your copy, then we move on to the offer. And the offer is important depending on what stage you're at, whether you're targeting cold traffic or you're targeting warm traffic. So if you're targeting cold traffic, that's people that are not aware of your brand. You want to have a low barrier to entry. You don't want to have too many things going on your site, like whether it may be excessive shipping fees or not that many testimonials or not that many reviews, like giving them some reason to like basically leave your site. You want to have a low barrier to entry. We'll talk about that. Now that we understand the story, we move on to the offer. Let's go back to that same example. All right, so this is your offer. 20% off your first order, and then free shipping on $99 orders and up. That's your offer. So hey, 20% off your first order. Now, this could be targeting cold traffic, which I'm assuming is probably targeting cold traffic. This is take 20% off your first order and revamp your wardrobe with our best-selling Luxe collection. Or it could be targeting an existing customer list, meaning people that have already bought from this brand, which is Built Basics, and they're like, hey, we have our Luxe collection. You can take 20% off your first order. All right, so your offer is the incentive. What do they get for consuming this ad? What do they get? They get 20% off their first order. And they also get free shipping on orders over $99 and up. All right, so that's your offer. All right, let's go up a little bit. So remember, when you're crafting ads, you need to start with your hook. And this is why we test so many creatives and we test so many videos to figure out what's working. And videos are slightly different than actual creatives because you notice on creatives, they're just static images, meaning you're looking at just an image. With video, it's slightly different. You have to click the play button, and we'll talk about videos in later lessons, but this one is just more so static images. But it applies the same concept, hook, story, offer. It's just how well do they consume your video? Like, do they just consume 3 seconds of it or 2 seconds of it and then they just drop off? That's where you need to like hook them in better and basically create better engagement in your video. That's for later lessons on how to create good hooks for your video lessons, but we're just talking about static images at the moment. So whenever you're crafting creatives, hook is your most important part. That's the first step. Don't even worry about anything else. Just your hook. If you have a good hook and a decent story and a decent offer, you will ultimately get people to come to your store, make purchases, and then you can start to make these better, your story and your offer. And if you pay attention to like the stories that's in these creatives, like it's very minimal, like 20% off and revamp your wardrobe. Build your own custom bundle and save. Plus score an extra 20% off your first time customer and a free gift with 175 plus orders. So it's not very overcomplicated. It's pretty simple. But the offer also is what takes them into your site. Whether it may be 20% off, or it might be a buy one, get one free, whatever it might be. Like this one is save on your first order. All right. And it says explore today and score free shipping. These are offers. This one, same way. Save on your first order. Let's look at another one. That way you can understand. This one's 20% off your first order. Again, low barrier to entry. They're like, hey, just try us out. We're going to give you 20% off your first order. That's offers. But ultimately, you need the hook. That is the most important step. So if you pay attention to whether it may be you or I or um, someone else in your family, when they're scrolling through Facebook, you have, like I said, a half a second to stop that user and basically do a pattern interrupt and be like, hey, check out my ad. And you need to master your hook. That's the first thing. We'll talk about what metrics you need to look at as far as if you have a great hook or if you have a great copy or how to build good copy and ultimately how to build great offers, whether it might be for your cold traffic. So whether it's for people that have never heard of your brand before or whether it's for warm traffic, meaning people that have already heard about your brand and they've already purchased something from you, whether it be once, twice, whatever it might be. All right. So you need to understand hook, story, offer. Whenever you're crafting ads, start with your hook. Then you can move on to your story. And then you can move on to your offer. So if your creative is not working and it's not hooking people, you need to start here. Don't move on to step 2. Don't move on to step 3. You need your hook to stop people. All right. Again, like I said, we'll talk about what metrics to look at as far as if your hook is performing well, if your creative is hooking people, and that kind of thing. And then you can start worrying about the later things like the story and the offer. All right, that's it for this lesson on hook, story, offer, and I'll see you on the next one.